What up, Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified YouTube channel. On this channel, it's really trying to demystify crowdfunding for you. We try to break it down, we try to pull it apart so you can understand it and so you can actually apply some of these principles when it comes to raising money with a crowdfunding campaign. So whether that's Kickstarter, Indiegogo, equity crowdfunding, which is the topic of today's video, we try to demystify that for you so you can really take action and apply some of the techniques that I'm mentioning. So today specifically, I want to get into whether or not WeFunder or equity crowdfunding or regulation crowdfunding is actually a good fit for you. It's some of the things you should consider before you actually go live, before you actually go down this path of raising capital online, which again is a completely new thing that you guys can now do. So we're getting into that in today's video. I think you're gonna learn a lot. I think you're gonna take away a lot of great stuff. Make sure you're taking notes, and let's get into it right now. So again, my name is Sal, so welcome to this channel. If this is your first time listening to this, I'm really trying to put out videos that are useful and helpful to other people that are out there. I've been in this industry for a long time, since 2012, and I've really seen the evolution of not only the Jobs Act and equity crowdfunding, but also traditional forms of crowdfunding, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, etc. And really my mission is to kind of empower other people out there to raise capital for their passion, to be able to actually fuel the actual expansion of their business. And that's one of the things I love doing with my coaching students when it comes to my books, my courses, etc. I love to be out there helping people and trying to put out no nonsense, very easy to understand, digestible information. So really going for a bird's eye view when it comes to understanding whether or not WeFunder is a good fit for you. What are some of the decision criteria or points you should be aware of? So let's kind of get into that right now. So the first point is that when you're doing a regulation crowdfunding campaign, when you're doing a WeFunder campaign and an equity crowdfunding campaign, the biggest difference between doing this and something like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, which is where it's more of like a pre-order campaign, we're actually selling product online. The biggest difference is that you are giving away equity, right? You're giving away equity in your company. You're technically selling securities online. Now, you might not be doing a price round necessarily, right? You might be doing a crowd safe or something like that, but you're technically kind of selling securities online, right? So when it comes to equity crowdfunding, when it comes to WeFunder, that's really the biggest difference between that and doing more of a Kickstarter, Indiegogo campaign. It can be very confusing though, and there's a lot of overlap because you can have perks as well, or gifts, if you will, rewards that also are tied with a WeFunder campaign. So for example, you could be giving away equity in a service or a company, right? And also have that be a reward where, for example, let's just say you're doing like a new app where you can go and you can rent bikes or something like that, right? And you're building a company around that. You could also have as a reward that you get a monthly pass to be able to ride bikes wherever you want to in your city, or you could have a yearly pass and be giving that away if someone invested like $1,000, right? So when it comes to WeFunder, that is the biggest difference, is that you are actually giving away equity in your company. You actually have to be willing to do that as well. And that's all really based around what's your value. What the heck are you valuing this company at, man, right? So your valuation is going to determine to a lot of people whether or not it's actually a good investment from the get-go, right? So you have to be willing to actually value your company, right? And thinking about your industry, thinking about what you're doing, thinking about the technology, et cetera. You have to be willing to give away a portion of equity in your company. I know everyone, when I say giving away equity, the first thing that most entrepreneurs think about is like, oh no, I'm giving away control, right? Well, if you think about it, you're only giving away a certain portion of equity. So you can kind of discuss that. You can look more into that. That kind of goes beyond the scope of this video, but you do have to be willing to do it. You have to be willing to bring in investment capital. And that's the big difference as well, is that investment capital, you can spend that how you like, right? You could spend that on marketing or advertising. You could spend it on HR salaries, whatever. When you're doing a Kickstarter campaign, you're really selling that product and you're having to spend a lot of those funds and actually delivering that product to the end group, right? So when it comes to this, you have to be willing to actually give away equity. You have to also be willing to value your company so that equity has some kind of worth. There's some way that investors can actually judge that. And the last thing that I would say when it comes to this is also not just viewing this as being like a win-lose. It's like, oh, I gotta give away equity, I gotta give away ownership, I don't wanna do this, right? Really thinking as well about partnering with these people. Who is it that you're gonna bring into the company? All these potential people who have many different networks, who can spread the word, who can become your evangelists, your brand ambassadors, all these different things. So you're not just giving away equity, right? You're also kind of building a community at the same time. However, when it comes to this, giving away equity, really thinking through that. Is that something, a path that you want to go to? Because once you begin that journey, you gotta make a big project, right? You gotta make a really big company. You gotta be committed to having a good exit or a good liquidity event in the future so that all those investors can cash out at a certain point in time. Number two, and when determining whether or not WeFunder is a good fit for you, whether or not you should do a regulation crowdfunding campaign, whether you should not do an equity crowdfunding campaign, is actually thinking about your entity type, right? So whether or not you're a beginner or you've been doing this for a really long time, you need to think about the entity in which you are raising money on a regulation crowdfunding platform. So for example, you can't go out there as a sole proprietor and raise investment capital that way. You have to have an entity that actually syncs up when it comes to these regulations. So typically that's going to be an LLC, or there's going to be a corporation of some kind. With an LLC, it's usually going to be units in that LLC, right? If it's a corporation, it's actual ownership in that way, right? So you have to do a little bit of your own research on this. I'm not going to advise on this. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant, right? Big disclaimer here. You should definitely talk to someone who knows a lot about that. But just kind of as a high level point, you do have to be willing to either open up that entity, either have the entity already ready to go, and also be willing to actually disclose the ownership when it comes to who else is already participating in this entity, right? So you are public in that nature, and you will be raising money, right? So when you're talking about these investors, you can only do that if you have an entity that makes sense when it comes to regulation crowdfunding. And typically, again, that's more of a corporation or that's an LLC right now. Number 3, when it comes to actually being willing to do this, is this a good fit for you? Is that, man, you gotta be willing to sell when it comes to those investors. And this can make so many people out there uncomfortable, right? I love sales. I think that sales is incredible. I think you're connecting people with products and services. I think you're giving them opportunities, right? Unless I'm willing to be vocal with my videos. Most people don't even know about this whole regulation crowdfunding, equity crowdfunding thing. You don't know about the incredible opportunities that are available to you. And that's why I try to do stuff like put out videos like this, or I've written the book, Equity Crowdfunding Explained, which you can check out an Audible version down below. You can also get a free copy if you get a free 30-day trial of Audible. I also include a free course that I put together to help you guys when it comes to equity crowdfunding, which I'll link up down below. So you can go step by step through that free course. It's great. It's amazing. I'll send you emails, etc. But that being said, you gotta be willing to sell. You gotta be willing to promote when it comes to your offer. You gotta be willing to actually sell investors. And sometimes you might have a company, you might have an opportunity that's actually not a great product. That's not a great sell, if you will, when it comes to that. So really think through a couple of things I'm about to mention. Number 1, when you're thinking about the big problem which you're solving, right? How is your solution unique? What is the technology that you're using? What about the team in which you've assembled to actually attack this problem? How can you sell this to potential investors? How can you get them excited about your team, excited about your solution, excited about the technology, right? Or the know-how which you developed in order to solve this particular problem. In addition, how big of a problem is this in your particular industry, right? So is this a really small problem that only a couple of people experience, maybe you, only the founder experience, or is this part of a massive growing marketplace? Is this part of a big segment in a larger industry? Is this something that's an industry-wide problem that needs to be solved? And if it is solved, it's going to be an incredibly valuable solution for whoever figures that out. And most importantly, as well, is this a market which is growing, right? Is it growing year over year? Is there potential for this company to be a really big company someday? The more that you really nail in and think about the problem that you're attacking and solving with this company, the way you're doing it in a unique fashion, some of your values, etc., so that your path to success, if you will, and also the people that are on the ground that are working every single day, be that engineers or marketers or coders, whoever it is, the more that you can actually sell people on the actual building blocks of the company, the more the investment just kind of becomes a no-brainer. And you might want to think as well, this is why a lot of people who have gone to Stanford and gone to Princeton, they can go easily out there and they can raise money because they have a certain pedigree, because they have certain engineers around them which they've worked with before that are incredible at what they do, right? Or if you're attacking a really great and big problem and you develop this really novel or interesting solution, even if you're someone who's really young, you can get investment capital. And why is that? Again, that's because you really focus on selling the building blocks of the company. So make sure you are willing to sell, make sure you're willing to put together pitch decks, etc. And we can talk about that more in a coaching call if you'd like to, but let's get to the next point. Want to take all the stress out of fulfilling your Kickstarter rewards? Fulfillrite is the turnkey solution that puts product delivery on autopilot. The Top Campaigns uses trusted high-tech provider to store, package, and ship their products. Focus on growing your business. Leave shipping to the experts. Don't wait. Get a custom quote from Fulfillrite today. Link in the description. Number 4 is, are you willing to actually promote this? Now, you will be astounded, you will be surprised, you will be blown away by the number of coaching calls that I do with people who are very excited, they're very enthusiastic, they're like, Sal, I love your videos that you put out there, right? I wanna do this, I wanna raise capital for my startup, but once it actually gets down to the brass tacks and you ask them, like, are you really willing to promote this? Are you really willing to use social media? Are you willing to actually broadcast to your own networks? Are you willing to do LinkedIn outreach? Are you willing to do email marketing, etc.? They're like, you know what? I don't know. We shouldn't agitate people, right? Or maybe we're being too aggressive. I think this is absolute BS, right? So the whole rules when it comes to regulation crowdfunding were put there for a reason. Doing general solicitation is a part of the rules. You are allowed to use tombstone style information and advertisements when it comes to regulation crowdfunding. So unless you're willing to be, I'd say, all in, be very aggressive about this, be willing to be intelligent and smart and not overwhelm people, but also be willing to freaking promote, you gotta be willing to promote if you want to expect to see results when it comes to regulation crowdfunding. Yes, you will get some investment when it comes to actual capital, whether that's WeFunder, Start Engine, Republic.co, Seed Invest, right? You will get some capital from investors that are already on that platform for sure. But you also want to jumpstart the process. You want to make the best use of this. If you're putting in so much work to actually get a campaign up, right, and to broadcast this to the masses, why not make this an incredible event and allow tons of people to actually become new investors in your company? So you got to be willing to promote this. And I know some of you are like, I am, but really when it comes down to it, you got to be willing to pull that promotion trigger and have promotions just kind of spiral out there for tons of people to check out so they know what you're doing, so they know who you are, so they understand the problem that you're solving, and they can actually connect with that investment right then and there. Number 5, numero 5, when it comes to this list is, man, you got a plan for growth, right? Because growth is so incredibly important. And here's why. If you have a company that even has a great solution to a problem, unless you are growing, that's not gonna be a great investment in the long run. So you always need to be thinking about growth. You always need to have a very growth-oriented mindset when it comes to communicating with your investors, because that's really what they're hearing. It's like, what are you doing next? How are you growing? How are you building this company? How are you assembling more of a team? How are you going into more markets or worldwide markets, right? How are you going even and assembling cross-functional teams against multiple different geographical areas in order to attack this problem in new ways and really expand into that market so you can become the biggest potential possible for your startup or for your company. When you have a growth-oriented mindset, when you're thinking in a hockey stick kind of way, when you're thinking about how can we really, pour fire on this. Maybe we've already seen some great growth when it comes to monthly active usage, daily active users. If you have a software product or something like that, we have tons of customers that are adopting this with really big names. How can we tell a story of growth? How can we have growth be in our future? And how can we communicate to investors that this is a priority for management at the company? The more you can communicate growth, the more that people see possibilities, because they realize that this is just the beginning and they want to get in then in the beginning because of all the growth that's going to happen in the future. Number 6 in my list, I know that we're going through a lot here today, so thank you so much for being a part of this channel. If you do like this video, give me a thumbs up, come subscribe to this channel for more content like this, and leave a comment down below if you made it thus far in the video, letting me know that you enjoy this style of content. So the next step is that you really have to understand the requirements of the platform in which you are raising money. So there are different requirements when it comes to regulation crowdfunding, when it comes to equity crowdfunding, based on the different platforms we mentioned before, like Republic, WeFunder, Seed Invest. I'm mainly focusing on US-based platforms at this point in time. We could always talk about Seeders over the bridge there when it comes to that, or Crowdcube. Like we could talk about these other companies, but I'm really focusing on in the United States, right? So you need to be aware of some of the ideas when it comes to the regulations around this and some of the requirements specifically for raising money on these platforms. Now, what do I mean when I say requirements, right? Because I hate these big words, regulations, requirements. How can we actually demystify this and break this down much more simply, right? So when we think about requirements, I'm specifically meaning the requirements as it relates to how much you are raising. So depending on how much you're raising under regulation crowdfunding, and I'll try to get graphic put in here so maybe you guys can see as well, depending on how much that you are raising, that's because you need to determine your burden when it comes to reporting requirements. So for example, are you just having an officer kind of sign off on your financials of the company, or do you need audited financial statements, right? These are different based on how much money you are raising. And the more you're raising, obviously, the more onerous those requirements get. So you need to have a little bit of an idea of some of those. And in many cases, you can actually use just the templates that are available to the platform, but you want to be aware of some of those requirements, as well as requirements, what I'll talk about later, when it comes to lead investors, when it comes to a test the waters period, which is part of regulation crowdfunding, when you're being announced to the crowd and you're doing actual advertisements, just being aware of requirements when it comes to things like tombstone style advertisements, not hyping things up too much that are inaccurate factual information, all that kind of stuff. You need to be aware of that. I recommend checking out my book, Equity Crowdfunding Explained, really easy to listen to in the car, very easy on the way to work, if you're doing some dishes, right? Or you're just kind of tuning out and you're going to the gym, great way to just just kind of learn at the same time. So I will link that up down below. And number seven tip that I want to include in this list is to number one, have a game plan, but number two is also you need a lead investor, okay? So by a lead investor, what do I mean? And then I'll talk more about the game plan, okay? So the lead investor is the person who's putting money first, if you will, into the company under this new, I guess, way of structuring it, if you will, or if you want to think of it this way, under the same terms as other people in this particular round of the company. Now, why is this important? It's important for two reasons. One, it's important because it gives a lot of credibility. So new people that are actually coming to this, they see that there's a reputable lead investor. Oh, okay, this guy probably knows what he's doing. He's a seasoned professional. Okay, it's going to provide much more trust for anyone who's actually coming and deciding to invest in that company. Number two, it actually is it's really related to actually the structure, which is that when this cap table is going to be assembled, capitalization table, and you can see all the ownership in the company, all those investors actually condensed into one line item on the cap table with the lead investor there kind of directing their voting power, right? Directing that power, if you will. In addition, when it comes to the lead investor, it's important because other people know that someone else is already investing at those same terms, so they know that they're getting a great deal. If someone is kind of investing at those terms, usually they've kind of done their due diligence to a degree already, right? So kind of also kind of assuages, if you will, or massages a lot of those fears when it comes to new investors. So those are a couple of reasons why you definitely need a lead investor, and in particular to cash out, to take those funds which you've raised and to put it in your bank account, you're gonna need one. So I'm gonna finish off this video just kind of talking about the game plan, man. But what do I talk about with the game plan, right? So if you ever played a sport, right? You ever played football, as more of a soccer guy, love to play baseball, whatever it is, when you're going up against a really great other team, you need to have a game plan, right? You need to be practicing, you need to be thinking about your strategy before you actually go live when it comes to a crowdfunding campaign. Now this could be for WeFunder, this could be for Start, this could be for any other platform that's out there. You wanna think about what your game plan is gonna be, not only leading up to the launch, right? How are you gonna be practicing before you go live, right? When it comes to, for example, like a Super Bowl, right? How are you gonna be repping, what are some of the wins you need to make before you actually go out there with your final game, right? Before you go out there and you actually battle the other mega team when it comes to the Super Bowl, right? But also when you're like halfway, what are you gonna be doing after the 30-day mark when you're raising capital? Are you gonna be keeping this round open for 90 days? Are you gonna be keeping it open for even longer? You need to be thinking about what your game plan is when you go live, before you go live, and also how you're gonna sync all of this up so that way you can have a powerful launch, you can make the best use of your time doing an equity crowdfunding campaign, and that way also when you're live, you can also get tons of media attention, get tons of people talking about you. To me, this is a worldwide incredible event, and it's really a media event, right? Now this is something that's so cool, is that like when you are doing a regulation crowdfunding campaign, or you're doing an equity crowdfunding campaign, you are making headlines at the same time. You are forming connections. How can you not only use this to raise capital, which is great, but also have some of these other side benefits, right? People checking you out, even people discovering you organically. I've had people who have done Reg CF campaigns, then getting on Shark Tank, right? Or then deciding to do Kickstarter campaigns. How can you really make the best use of your time when you're doing one of these projects? So if you want the answer to that, I really want to kind of just bounce this off someone else. I do these intensive coaching calls where I go in depth through your game plan, your strategy. I also help on a limited number of campaigns when I can. This is really for people that are serious. This is for people that kind of want to understand like exactly what you got to do, the formula, if you will. They don't have necessary time, or maybe they already have read one of my books. A lot of people actually have already read my book when they book a coaching call. So it's a great place to start. But if you're really looking to learn more about this and you kind of want to talk about this from a marketing angle, you want to talk about this from a strategic angle, what you can do, what you need to do, etc. And also even is this a good fit for you and your company? Go and book a one-on-one coaching call with me down below. I will include a link in one of my pinned comments so you can check that out. But thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Salvador Briggman. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.